Washington today. At that hearing, New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez referred to the flow of fentanyl coming into this country as one of the most urgent challenges facing the American public. Robert Cantor knows the problem firsthand. He almost lost his daughter to an addiction and an overdose, and he himself has suffered, and now he tours the world talking about addiction and recovery. Robert, thanks for being with us. And as we mentioned, the Senate today describing the situation as dire. In your opinion, how dire is the situation America faces when it comes to opioids?
Del, it's an honor and privilege to be here. Thank you for having me and for the airtime. And it is a dire situation. You know, I'll tell you, first of all, I will tell you that ironically today, the CDC, Dr. Gupta released numbers in a White House press release that 106,000 plus overdose fatalities are predicted for the 12-month period ending in September of 2022. There hasn't been much change in those horrific numbers, unfortunately, and those are very dire numbers. And, you know, I will tell you that today's hearing, and I watched it and I looked at the transcripts, was really a tale of two hearings. It was a lot about talking about China and the precursor chemicals and the Mexican drug cartels. And those are things that I think we really, the committee, it's over their head. Those are issues that I don't think they're going to be able to handle. It's at a much higher level. When you talked about the DEA, when you talked about social media, those are, I think, actionable steps that can be taken where corrections can be made, and we can reverse this prolific epidemic.
Robert, I spent a lot of time working the streets when crack was the epidemic. There's always a problem of supply and demand. First of all, on the supply side, how do the cartels operate and get drugs into this country?
Well, China is the main manufacturer. I mean, India has some culpability, Del, but China is the main manufacturer of what we call precursor chemicals, which are the norfentanyl and 4-AP. They're known as the precursor chemicals. Those chemicals are sold, and there's a number of production chemical plants in China. Those chemicals are then trafficked over to the Sinaloa and Jalisco drug cartels. And they use clandestine laboratories to produce an endless amount of the fentanyl. So it's not about how much they can produce, it's about how much. They're only limited by the amount of the precursor chemicals they can purchase from China. And then it's a matter of how much they can traffic in, and we know that that's a whole nother separate issue as well.
Robert, on the demand side, why do Americans keep taking these pills if we know that they can kill us?
Because they're very, very highly addictive, and that's where, unfortunately, the social media problem comes in, and they talked about that too. The committee senators sent a letter to Mark Zuckerberg, Meta, before the committee hearing, urging them to have more transparency and to share more information on what is happening on their platforms on Facebook and on WhatsApp. And specifically, the DEA wants to understand the algorithms that they use that are connecting the sellers and the buyers. You know, social media is anonymous, it's enormous, and it's accessible. And that element, the social media element, it's really the superhighway that's charging the drug epidemic as well. And it's a big, big problem. But it is a solvable problem as long as we can put pressure on those individuals to make those changes and be more transparent.
Let's talk about Washington for a second. Senator Ted Cruz and a DEA official, Ann Milgram, had a long back and forth during today's hearing, talking about the southern border and how fentanyl is coming into the country. I want you to take a listen to this.
Gotaways can vary from terrorist on the terror watch list. In fiscal year 2022, 98 people on the terror watch list were encountered at the southern border that we know of. Or they can be drug dealers carrying drugs. Is that correct?
Senator, I'm going to defer questions on the border and the ports of entry to the Department of Homeland Security.
So the DEA has no view on whether drug dealers crossing the border carry drugs?
Senator, as I said, from our investigations, what we see is that the majority of fentanyl.
I didn't ask the majority. I said drug dealers and gotaways are carrying drugs, many of them.
Senator, what we see is mostly what we see is mostly tractor trailers and personal vehicles.
All right, so you're sticking to the talking points closely.
So, Robert, as you know, this is a political volleyball. One side wants to say that the borders are open and that fentanyl is coming in and drug dealers are coming in and they're killing our kids. The other side wants to say the borders are secure. What's your take?
Well, I think that was wrong. That was a politically driven exchange. He mercilessly grilled Ann Milgram, the administrator of the DEA, which was not necessary because the DEA, under her leadership, are doing everything they possibly can with the funding that they're getting and the money for technology that they're getting to put a dent into this problem. And it is a very, very complicated problem. And we all have to work together on this so that we can stem this tide and reverse this prolific epidemic. I think that was very, very uncalled for and very politically driven. And I think, and she's right. The DEA handles only certain issues as it relates to the border, which is being aggressive and it relates to law enforcement and scanning and trying to cut down the amount of traffickers that are coming in.
If the United States lifts the sanctions against China, do you think that China would be more cooperative in providing information on the fentanyl pandemic?
Dal, honestly, that's a question that's kind of over my head, to be very, very honest with you. I mean, there are so many moving parts to this situation with China. Quite frankly, I don't think China is affected by anything that we do here in the United States, whether it's sanctions or whether it's what's going on with the drug cartels. I really believe that the problem we have with China, Dale, is that there's no oversight on their chemical industry. And so unless they crack down and have oversight on those precursor chemicals, you're just going to have a situation where it's going to be an endless flow to the cartels. So if you're asking me my opinion, as a recovery advocate and a commentator, I don't think that that's going to matter one bit.
Robert, before I let you go, we began by saying that this is personal for you because you almost lost a daughter. How's she doing?
Thank you for asking. She's in her 5th year of recovery from substance use disorder. She's lost a lot of friends. I also am recovered from substance use disorder as well. I've been sober many years. And that's the driving force. That's been that is the genesis of my work, Del. I do this, as an avocation because so many lives are lost. So many of these parents are getting that horrific call from the coroner's office. I didn't get that call, but it doesn't mean I don't have to sit aside and not take action and help out here. And that's why I do what I do.
Tell her we're wishing for years 6, 7, 8, and then beyond that. Robert Cantor, who addresses the fentanyl epidemic worldwide. Robert, thanks for your insight tonight.
Honor and privilege, Del. Thank you for having me.